going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we'll be breaking down my must-start running backs for Week 9 of the 2023 fantasy football season. If you guys are new here, this is all we do here all year round, free fantasy football content. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way in. But more importantly, get in the comments down below anything that you guys need, start, sits, trades, waivers, whatever it may be, anything pertaining to the 2023 fantasy football season. Let me know. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I possibly can. But without further ado, let's hop into today's video. All right, first up, I'm going with Kenneth Walker. For a lot of you guys, Walker is going to be a must start no matter what. As you know, in these videos, we don't really talk about, the Austin Ecklers or Christian McCaffreys or these high caliber running backs. But man, Walker is the RB7 in fantasy. But there's been a lot of panic around Walker as a running back with a tough schedule coming up for the rest of the season. And two performances in a row that have kind of made fantasy managers a little bit scared because he hasn't found the end zone and the ceiling hasn't been as high. His worst performance so far on the season in Week 8 against Cleveland with just 8 fantasy points. Listen, guys, I know that this matchup against the Ravens in Week 9, you might see it, get a little bit worried. It's an away game, but actually the weakest part of this Ravens defense from a fantasy perspective on the season has been against the running back position, and the volume is going to be here for Kenneth Walker no matter what. I can easily see him bouncing back this week, finding the end zone again, and even if he doesn't, it's not like he's been that bad from a real-life football perspective. He's still at 66 yards on the ground in Week 8, still had 8.2 yards per carry, and then in Week 7 had 105 yards on the ground. So while it didn't translate to the best fantasy stat lines, 8 points in Week 8, 13.10 in Week 7 is certainly nothing to panic over, in my opinion. And like I said, while this Ravens defense is good, the weakest part of this team from a fantasy perspective has been against the running back position. So you own Kenneth Walker, don't do anything crazy. Keep him in your starting lineup. He's still a must-start running back as we approach Week 9. Next up, we've got Isaiah Pacheco, the Kansas City Chiefs, coming in as your RB9 so far on the season. And he actually made the video for Week 8 must-start running backs, going up against the Denver Broncos, who have been the worst team in the league so far against the running back position. But we all saw what happened in Week 8. Let's move on to Week 9, and Pacheco had his worst fantasy performance so far of the year in Week 8. I think things are going to be much better in Week 9 at home against Miami Dolphins. Guys, I expect a lot of points in this matchup. The Miami Dolphins defense has not been good at all throughout the entire season. I mean, they looked pretty decent last week with Jalen Ramsey coming back, playing the Patriots, all of that, but man, all I can think of when I think about this Dolphins-Chiefs matchup is points. And the Chiefs defense has been very good this year. Nothing to sneeze at, but we know this Miami Dolphins offense is absolutely phenomenal. And we know that their defense is going to bend throughout the game. Their run defense has not been good. Pacheco should bounce back. Patrick Mahomes should not have the flu. If you are spooked about that Week 8 performance, scratch it away. It's not going to look that way for the Chiefs in Week 9. Pacheco should absolutely bounce back. He is still a running back that we are starting no matter what as we approach Week 9. Next up, I'm going with Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders, who comes in as the RB12 so far on the season. The last couple weeks haven't been great. He only has hit double digits once in the last 4 weeks. Other than that, 9.9 or less fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. Couple of tough matchups, but a couple of good matchups as well. Like I said, still a top 12 running back in fantasy, though. Gets the New England Patriots defense this week, which we kind of think about this defense. Patriots correlate them to being a good defense overall, but they haven't been that good against opposing running backs so far on the season. And ultimately, they haven't been very good on the season as a whole. When we look at Brian Robinson, he's still been playing okay. He just needs to find the end zone. And even though he found the end zone in Week 7 and gave you a single-digit performance, and last week, even though he had 59 yards on the ground and 20 receiving yards, still gave you a single-digit performance, I think he can easily bounce back against the Patriots this week. And I mean, the running back position has been so faulty throughout the year. We've seen so many different injuries that if you do own Brian Robinson, I still think he is 100% a player that we can start moving into week 9. Don't be too afraid of this Patriots defense, and this Commanders offense has looked pretty good as a whole lately. They might not be winning games, but from a fantasy perspective, they've definitely looked good. If you own Brian Robinson, I don't think the ceiling is extremely high, but I still think he is absolutely a running back that we can start moving into week 9. Next up, I'm going with Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns, who made the video last week. Did not disappoint against Seattle. 13.7 fantasy points, 55 yards on the ground, a touchdown, and a reception for 12 receiving yards. He now has double-digit fantasy performances 3 weeks in a row, 13 or more fantasy points in every single game. It's worth noting that Jerome Ford got some involvement last week coming off of that ankle injury, ended up not missing week 8, but once again in week 7, Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt both hit double digits. In week 6, they also both hit double digits. So even if Ford sees an increase in volume compared to last week, I'm not worried about it because they get the Arizona Cardinals, one of the worst teams in the entire league against opposing running backs from a fantasy perspective. So this is a good matchup. Hunt has looked great. He scored at least 1 touchdown in the last 3 games with 2 touchdowns in week 7. So overall, I just think Kareem Hunt, a player that you probably got off the waivers, is a guy that you can plug and play against the Arizona Cardinals defense, a really, really, really soft defense against the running back position from a fantasy performance. You can plug him in, not have to think twice about it. He should be a lock for double digits as we approach week 9. All right, the last player I want to talk about today is Rashad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who quietly has had double-digit performances in the last 2 weeks, 15 or more fantasy points in the last 2 weeks, 65 receiving yards or more in the last 2 weeks, 6 or more targets in the last 2 weeks, and 6 or more receptions in the last 2 weeks. He has not dropped a single pass in the last 2 weeks. So finally, Baker Mayfield is wising up to the fact that Rashad White is a great pass catching back. He should continue to be a PPR machine as we move into this week 9 matchup against the Houston Texans, who have been much better against opposing running backs than we've seen in the past couple of seasons. But even in week 10 against Tennessee or week 11 against San Francisco, I still think Rashad White is a player that you can continue to start because he is racking up PPR volume on a week-to-week basis. Like I said, that reception and that target number is just continuing to go up, and I don't really see that changing. This is what we've been waiting for from Rashad White all season long. One of my favorite players in the offseason at the running back position. We just need to see, the pass catching come to life, but he needs to get those opportunities for that to happen. Outside of week 2, he hasn't had 5 targets in a single game leading up to that week 7 performance against Atlanta. Things improved in week 8 with an additional target, and he's still doing okay on the ground. The biggest thing is we like to see him score a touchdown, but man, like I said, it just might not matter. As long as he's continuing to get the same amount of targets, he's going to give you that PPR value. Rashad White is still a player you can plug in as an RB2 against the Houston Texans as we approach week 9. That'll do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy the content today or find it helpful, be sure to subscribe on the way out. This is all we do here all year round. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe. But more importantly, get in those comments down below. Anything that you guys need, start, sits, ads, drops, trades, whatever it may be, pertaining to the 2023 fantasy football season, let me know. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I possibly can. And with that, I will say, thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.